Hey everyone, this lesson is going to cover chapters 11 and 12, which is all about 180-degree rules and lighting. So there's this term you're going to hear more than once probably if you get into broadcast production, which is called crossing the line. And it refers to camera placement during shooting as well as the 180-degree rule. See, when you're shooting, you want to always keep the viewer in mind and what they're seeing and how they're seeing it. You're crafting their visual experience. You want to make sure that it's not confusing, easy to follow, and adaptable. Viewers form maps in their minds of a scene that they're watching, even if things off screen and objects and people appearing where they're not expected to will only confuse the viewer. So the best way to be mindful of this and to not confuse your viewer in regards to these mental maps is to imagine that there are two people in the scene facing each other, which is often the case. Then you draw an imaginary line between the two of them from up above. You can see on this graphic. We're going to call that line the line of action. So this divides the 360-degree circle into two 180-degree halves. That's where the 180 comes in. Now, you're going to decide from what side you're going to shoot the scene and set up your first/establishing shot accordingly, right? Maybe you're going to be on the side that's in the graphic, right? And maybe you switch to the other 180-degree side. But for this purpose, we're going to assume you're setting up there, as you can see in the graphic. So all of your other shots that you're going to shoot for this scene, the coverage, the cutaways, the other long shots, the other medium shots, whatever you planned, should be taken on the same side as that establishing shot and in the same half of the circle, right? You can see now there are 3 cameras set up there for your presumed shots, and they're all in the same half of the circle, right? If you put your camera onto the other side of the circle, it's going to result in shots that are going to confuse the viewer and their map made invalid, right? And when you go to edit it together, it will seem odd, weird, and inconsistent, which you want to avoid completely, right? Unless, of course, that's your intent, but that's not our intent for 90% of what you're doing, 95% of what you're doing. I've got a video embedded in this PowerPoint that explains this visually that might make it easier to grasp. I'll also link it directly in Blackboard. There is, of course, ways to break the rule and film from the other side. And one way to do that is to use the camera physically moving to the other side during the scene so the viewer can reorient themselves to the action. There's another video embedded here that I'll put in Blackboard that breaks down the 180-degree rule in greater detail, including ways to break that rule, right? So you want to check that out. Lighting. Lighting is obviously a key component to a video shoot and not always under your control, right? Depending on the type of shoot you're doing. The lighting concepts discussed here are most applicable when shooting in a studio environment with a simple lighting kit and not on location outside with or without. Not on location outside and or without a lighting kit. We're going to look at the basics that hopefully you'll have access to, and most people do when they're doing basic shoots. 3-point lighting is the basis for lighting design in many broadcast productions, and there are 3 key components. There's the key light, there's the fill light, and there's the backlight. And we're going to look at each one of those individually. We're going to use this still as Sean Connery as James Bond to demonstrate this 3-point lighting concept, right? So there's James, Sean, sitting at a poker table, and where's his key light? Well, the key light is the brightest light source. It's placed to one side so that it illuminates from an angle for a desired effect. It's the brightest light source placed to one side so it illuminates for the desired effect. So here we have, looking at Sean Connery, looking at James Bond, the key light is to our right and his left. And it's the brightest light in the scene, and it's lighting him for the shot. The fill light is used the opposite of the key light, and it reduces or eliminates harsh shadows that are created by the key light. Light creates shadows, right? That's how light works. So the fill light is less intense than the key light, and it's there to even the scene out and keep those harsh shadows from being there, of course, unless that's what you want, right? Many times people may want to have harsh shadows in the shot. And if that would be the case, you might not use a fill light at all. But for this example, we certainly are. So you can see that the fill light is off to the left, the opposite side of the key light from the front. Of course, both of these are from the front, or to the side of the front. And it's filling in the shadows, right? The backlight is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It originates from behind and either above, below, or to the side of the back of the main object you're lighting, right? It can create a silhouette effect, creates distance between the subject and the background, and it's often used, it's always used in three-point lighting setups, right? Again, you may not want that effect. You may want to not use the backlight for whatever reason you're going for, whatever shot you're looking for, whatever look you're going for. But for our case, we're going to use one. As you can see, it's lit from the back. It kind of has a silhouette or a halo around him, and it's from above. So it creates distance between him and the people behind him, and of course also highlights him as the star of the scene, not to mention the film. So three-point lighting is what's going on here, what we're seeing, right? The back is lit, the front, the key light, and then the fill light. There's another graphic that sort of breaks it down and how it often looks. And of course, there are a multitude of lighting combinations. These are just a simple, basic one we're going to look at. And obviously the three terms that you should absolutely know so you can set things up with people, right? Once again, I've embedded a nice video that sets up a lot about the three-point lighting concept, and I'll have that directly linked in Blackboard as well. You should definitely check it out. So many of these things we would cover in person class. I would watch these videos together. We would watch these videos together and discuss them. So please do take advantage of them. Even if you're not using a lighting kit, you can still use the same concepts with whatever light you have. Your textbooks have some nice examples on pages 112 through 116, so check those out. Basic lighting can impact three major aspects of your shot, right? You got your highlight, you got your mood, and you got your depth. So let's look at some of those right now. Here are some examples of using various lighting techniques to highlight a specific part of a shot as opposed to lighting the whole shot, right? On the bottom left, we're highlighting his hand, the cigarette, the woman. The man is completely in shadows, right? Middle shot, all we have really lit is that little boy's face. To the right, just the guy's eyes and the maker's mark label. The bottom shot, pretty much the couple is what's illuminated, right? So this is called highlight lighting. When you're not shooting, you don't want to see the whole scene. There are components that you want to leave in the shadows because either A, they're not as important, or B, you want that shadowy effect. You want some mystery. That's what you would do. You'd use lighting to highlight. Of course, you have mood lighting. And a mood or a feeling of a shot is often created by lighting, right? Two major types of lighting used to do this that use the three-point lighting concepts discussed earlier are high-key lighting and low-key lighting. High-key lighting is when the fill light and the backlight are nearly as bright as the key light. So it's very bright. There are very few shadows. The effect is of an evenly distributed light source in the entire shot. Most sitcoms on sets are shot this way. Think of Seinfeld or Friends or anything shot on a set where you have to ask yourself, where's this light coming from? It adds to a sense of artificiality because no one's apartment is lit like that. But they're doing it because that's the look they're going for, right? It often is used to create a happy and an upbeat mood, like The Wizard of Oz. Here, we have it all shot. It's a high-key lighting. There are no real shadows designed to create mystery or effect or anything like that. It's just everything is evenly distributed, right? Low-key lighting is the opposite of that. When the fill light and the backlight are much less intense than the key light, some areas are brightly lit while some are in deep shadow or blackness. It's often used to create a somber and downbeat mood, something like this shot from The Godfather Part 2. We have a lot of darkness, a lot of shadows. Michael's face is lit, obviously, and his two hands are lit. Everything else is pretty subdued and dark. And the filmmaker's using it to create a mood, and it's also reinforcing themes of the film. If you've ever seen The Godfather, the iconography of the Godfather poster is a puppet master, a hand holding the strings, and that's definitely what Michael is doing in this part of the film. So it reinforces that. It's using lighting to reinforce visual language, and it's an example of low-key lighting. And then there's depth lighting. Good lighting that can create a sense of depth in the room by highlighting people or objects in the background and or in the foreground. And it gives the shots less of a two-dimensional flat feel and makes it feel and look more three-dimensional and layered. So a lot of times lighting will continue back into the back and create distance, right? All three of these examples here are good shots, good lighting shots that create the sense and show you what's far back in the shot, right? So that's an example of using lighting to create depth. Getting good at lighting takes lots of practice. And of course, there are people who make their entire careers out of it and do very well. It can be very time consuming. So you have to be sure when you're shooting to allow yourself plenty of time when lighting, right? If lighting is a key part of your production. There are certainly productions that lighting is an important part, but not the key part, and you don't have that much time, you don't have that much light. But if you're planning to use lighting to great effect, make sure you cut that time into there, right? And remember that lights use electricity. They get very hot. They can easily tip over. So you got to think about that when you're putting together a risk assessment for a shoot. What lighting are we going to have? What resources do they need? What do I need to plan ahead to make sure that lighting is going to run effectively and safely? So I want you to go to, there's a 180-degree rule and lighting quiz that you're going to take. And then there's a group discussion board where you're going to do some discussing about lighting. So I look forward to see what you have to share with us there, and I will see you on the boards.